ask about the precepts. That I noticed that the 5 precepts, at least for lay people, they're all in the negative. Abstain from killing, don't lie, don't steal, don't. So I was wondering why is it that they're only in the negative and there aren't any, they aren't presented, or there aren't any actual kind of positive precepts like do this, be good, be bad, something like that.
One of the teachers in our school, who was one of us, I don't know, maybe Buddha said him that way, or whoever wrote him down, was like that. It's like the teachings, you're going to go to hell, this kind of thing. But one of Sahn Sunim's students, who grew up in New England, which is pretty liberal and everything, has ended up for the last 20-some years, maybe 30 years, in the Midwest. And some areas of the Midwest in America is very conservative. And he found that people who were interested in meditation, interested in Buddhism, they didn't like the precepts that way, the negative. So he just rewrote them positive. I think Thich Nhat Hanh might have done the same thing. The first is, I vow to honor every life, or to respect and honor every life. I vow to respect others' things instead of don't steal. I vow to engage in wholesome actions instead of, don't do wrong actions out of lust. Instead of don't lie, I vow to, honor the truth. So that he just rewrote them in a positive way, and people like it very much. Yeah. So every time you read them, don't kill, think about, honor every life. This includes mosquitoes. Ants, jinne, bees. The first time I decided to do a 1-week solo retreat when I was first practicing, I borrowed, I knew a friend who had some land in the mountain, and he had an American-style teepee, like an Indian teepee. It's a bunch of logs like this with an opening at the top where they cross, and canvas around it, and then a cut hole, and you can go inside. And I think I went there in the summer, so I didn't have to worry about it being cold. And I took a ridiculous diet, oatmeal and carrots. I mean, it was so stupid. And I just boiled it up every day once, and then over a wood fire. But when I first went into the teepee with a sleeping bag and a little mat for sitting, and I was going to do a lot of chanting, I saw that on one of the poles was a wasp's nest, and it had about 8 or 9 wasps on it. They were just starting to build it. And my first thought was to get a branch and knock it down. And then I thought to myself, I came here to do 7 days of practice so I become compassionate, and the first thing I'm going to do is destroy their house. So I remembered kind of like, what do I do? And I thought, okay, well, we'll just try and live here together and see what happens. Nothing happened. When the day was hot, they'd come down and buzz around me. And in the mornings and the evenings, they just stayed up there. Nothing happened at all. So, actually it's so beautiful, this honor all life. That's a very nice way to say it. Yeah, if you make your own Zen center sometime, rewrite them in a positive way. It'd be cool if our whole school did that, but on my own, I'm not going to change it. I wouldn't change it. At one point, the Heart Sutra in English said, the Bodhisattva depends on prajna paramita. His mind is no hindrance, without any fear, or something he. It had his and he. And so within a couple years, we had, Seung had about 6 or 7 Zen centers. And of course, in Berkeley, California, and Cambridge, Boston, the people there, women there, started to complain. Why is it he and his? You know. Then San Sunim said, in the Chinese, there's no masculine or feminine. So don't worry about it. And they were like, well, we're doing this in English. And it says he and his. And they wouldn't, and then San Sunim said, don't touch sutras. But they didn't back off, you know. And they kept complaining, you know, strongly. So finally San Sunim said, where'd we get this translation? We hadn't made it. We got it from the San Francisco Zen Center, which was older than our group. It had been started by Suzuki Roshi. Then San Sunim said, so we change ourself is not so good. So our group write a letter to all the different Zen groups in America. You know, there was a Chinese Zen group, there were 3 or 4 Japanese, there was our Korean Zen group, maybe more. And tell them the problem, tell them what the issue is, and say, do we want to, as a group, change that and make the American English Heart Sutra that doesn't have that? And so they did. They wrote everybody. And somehow, I wasn't part of the office then, but our office person represented us and wrote everybody. And everybody thought, yeah, let's change it. All the different Zen groups. And they came up with, instead of he, the one, and I think one's mind. I think that's what it says. I forget right now. But we took out the male and female. And he said, that's very good. That is American Heart Sutra. You know, he didn't think that one group should decide. That was his style. Everybody decide together, then that's not just our opinion. And, you know, the issue in America was already from the 1960s, and probably for some people, well, definitely much, much older. You know, all men are created equal. That's what it says in the document, you know. That meant the women aren't in there. And then it didn't say this, but it meant the black people aren't in there, you know. There's some historians who say America only became a true democracy in 1965, when the federal government guaranteed voting rights. But even because of the way America works, the federal government and the state governments have a little different power, and they fight with each other. And sometimes the federal government just says, this is the way it is. And then those states hate it. And that's what happened with slavery. The way they ended slavery was they had a war, civil war, you know. But even then, when they made this all African American men can vote, the states which control the voting found ways of making rules so they couldn't. Like some of the states, if your grandfather voted, you can vote. Well, none of their grandfathers voted. They were all slaves. Same thing. Women had no vote until 1920, 1921, you know, in most countries. So, that was an issue, and I thought San Sunim had a good way of, you know, sometimes we just didn't accept his first thing, but he might push something, but when he saw, well, no, then he would come up with a creative way that might fit better for our situation. This is quite good. And then, nobody complained after that. Okay. Then some new issue would appear later. But I think because he had this don't know mind, he could adjust to situations. Not frivolously. Not just change. No. Like, our style of walking meditation is our hands like this over our lower belly. But if you go to the Korean Sunpang, it's much different. It's pretty much whatever you want, right? Yeah, you swing your arms. I've been in a Chinese temple, the Six Patriarchs Temple, done a 3-day retreat there. And they don't go in the altar's in the center of the room. And you sit on these raised platforms around the edges. And walking meditation, everybody climbs down, gets in their shoes, and then starts going around. But you don't go in line. If you go slowly, you go around in the middle of the room. And as you go sort of spiral out, it's faster and faster. So the young monks like to do walking meditation on the outer edge of the room. And they've got these long sleeves and they swing their arms. And the tricky part is if you want to leave to go to the bathroom. Because it's like a traffic and you gotta work your way through these different, there's no circles. It's just go around. It's so interesting. So anyway, in America, so we had an issue here at Musangsa, because we came down here and a few of our Sunims had been to the Western Sunims, had been to the Korean Sunpang. And they were like, that's not how Sunims do it. But San Sunim was trying to get us to just all do the same thing. So he would say, when you're in the Korean temple, do it the Korean way. When you're in the Quantum temple, do it the Quantum way. But, when I was away and I'd come back, it had changed. And everybody wasn't going to listen to me. And San Sunim kind of was my problem to deal with. We wear Dae to chanting. But in the West, I don't know what they do now, but no, it was always you wore this to chanting if you were a Sunim. And the Dharma teachers did too. And then if there was a ceremony, then you put on the Dae if you're a Sunim. Now I know in Asia they'll say morning chanting and evening chanting is a ceremony. But San Sunim was trying to make things simple. But anyway, I was away, I came back, and okay, everybody's wearing this. Fine with me, I didn't care. And I knew it was going to be a struggle, and it didn't seem worth it. So we wear Dae to chanting. And one time I said to Seung Santini, I mentioned 3 of our other Western monks, and I said, this monk, they all have ideas of what Musangsa should be like. But sir, I don't have any idea. Why'd you make me Joshua? And he looked at me. We were standing up in his room at walking, and he looked at me and he said, only go straight. So whatever. So I always try to connect with the spirit behind it. And the form is, you want to be careful, because I tried to keep things united with the rest of the school. But, for example, the last sitting at night, I don't know if you know, but if other people might remember, the teacher or the Seung walks around with a stick and hits everybody. Well, after a while, we felt like, we're doing these Kyol Ches 6 months of the year, every year. I mean, I think that the Sunims, at least, or even the lay people who come often, they're sick of that, So I just decided, let's not do it. So do we do it? I forget. Yeah, so we don't do it. Then there was another thing that Sahn Sunim started, not immediately, but later when the students who were living with him, the first Zen center, he said, every morning bow to the teacher. Then there was one guy who was actually the head Dharma teacher who didn't want to bow to the teacher. So Sahn Sunim said, if you want to stay here, you must bow to the teacher. That's not bowing to me, that's a bowing to teaching. And this person wouldn't do it, so he left. That was even before I came. So that was the thing. Well, the same thing happened. For me, I felt like every morning, now I don't even come to morning bows, but every morning everybody gets up. They live with me, They, or me and Dae Bong Sunim, they know we're not perfect. In fact, some of them hate us, But they have to bow every day. So one day I just said, okay, the days we have interviews. And then people like that a little better. And then that disappeared. So what was the fallout from that? Okay. So one of the teachers from Europe came here, and he saw, we don't bow to the teacher every morning during retreat. So when he went back to Europe, their retreat had like a different teacher from Europe every week or 2 weeks. So when he was there, he said, why don't we just bow to each other? So he bowed to them. And then the next day, he said, you don't need to bow in the morning, or something like that. Then when the other European teachers would come there, they'd get upset because nobody got up and bowed, and they said, you must bow. And this teacher said, when they complained to him, they said, well, at Musangsa, they don't bow to the teacher. So I thought, and then they wrote me, and I just wrote back, kind of, I don't know what I said, but it was similar to this. So it's tricky. Sahn Sunim did those things, so we saw our opinions and put it down. That was the main thing. And of course, in America, where everything was brand new, there's no history of Buddhism, there's no natural respect to Sunims, unless you're Catholic. It's so interesting. I was on jury duty. I don't know if your countries have it, but in America, every adult can get called to sit on a trial and make a decision. There's usually 12 people. And they decide, is the person guilty or not? Things like that. So one day, when I'm in Boston as abbot, I get the notice in the mail, jury duty. And I'm thinking, I don't want to do this. But you have to legally. One time when Biden was vice president, he got the notice. But when he appealed, they said, yeah, you have a special job, so you don't have to do it. But he also got the notice. They didn't send one to the president. They wouldn't. But then they realized, don't send it to the vice president anymore. So it was a trial, and they call you up one by one, and the two lawyers ask you questions, and they decide whether they both have to agree that you're on the jury. So they both wanted me. They thought I'd be on their side. But I said to the judge, well, I'm a Buddhist monk, and in my religious training, one of our rules is don't judge others. And the judge said to me, yeah, we understand that, so we don't require ordained people to be on criminal trials. But if it's a civil trial where nobody will go to jail, just some money fine, we expect you to do your duty as a citizen. So I had to go on this jury. So it took about a week. But what was interesting is when we first met each other, everybody introduced themselves. And I introduced myself, and they're looking at me like, what are you? And I said, I'm a Buddhist monk. And 10 of the people nine of the people didn't care at all. So I just told them my lay name, and they liked that, and to them I was just somebody else. But two women, after the meeting, came over to me and said, well, what's a Buddhist monk? And I realized they're Catholic. So I said, well, it's kind of like, is that like what do they call it? A priest, a father? And I said, yeah, we don't have families. We live in the temple and everything. After that, they always called me father. They would bring on our breaks, they'd bring me Cokes and candy. They'd always say, good night, father, when they left. But America's a Protestant country. So in general, there's no, respect for monks. So Sahn Sunim had to get some focus. So everybody bowed to the teacher. It wasn't about who's a Sunim, who's not. So part of the thing became, if it's a lay teacher, you also bow. So he just tried to make things simple, and everybody does the same thing. And, forms have some meaning, and people will give them a spiritual thing too. Like there's a way of putting on your big kasa and your robe so it doesn't touch the ground. And of course you can say, it represents Buddha's robe, it's holy. But the other practical side is you don't have to wash it as often if it doesn't touch the dirty ground. It's not dirty in here, but on the dirt it's dirty. But I don't put it on the right way because I never got trained in it. And when they tried to teach me, I was already a monk like 10 years, and most people, you do it your way, And mine always touches the ground, So there's, in all these things, you grew up Jewish, right? Don't eat pork. Come on, God didn't say don't eat pork. Probably pork in the Middle East goes bad really easily. So how are you going to get people to not eat pork? God said. The Muslims have the same thing because they're from the same area. So it's so funny, actually. Almost all these things have a practical aspect. But if we attach to them, we become very nasty people. So, anyway, when you're on Zen Center, even if it's Kwan, I give you permission to write it in a positive way, and you can tell people in Europe, well, Dae Bong Sunim said it's okay. I'll probably be dead by then, so no problem.